This is nice. You get to sit. Wow. How convenient. Hello, everyone. It's good to have you in class, and we're going to start a little pilgrimage that begins today and goes for 8 weeks, as I understand. And as you know, Martha and I run a travel company, and we host groups. We started in Israel, but then it moved to Greece and Turkey and Italy and Germany and England and Scotland and Ireland and Jordan, I guess. And we've been having a wonderful time the last 12 years traveling. We love travel. You have to like to travel if you're doing what we're doing. And yeah, I say that I really enjoy my home as long as I'm not there all the time. It's in our blood. So what we want to do is take you around the country of Israel. Nothing substitutes for an actual trip there, but we try to do the best we can. I started doing these, what we called seminars, with the Amish, the old order Amish, because they're not allowed to fly unless it's an emergency. And I'm trying to talk their bishops into believing that a trip to Israel is an emergency. But they want us to come and do this at Amish Christmas banquets for Amish businesses. They bring their employees in, and so a few years ago I had the chance to speak to 500 widows in northern Indiana at an Amish kind of gathering banquet. Some businessmen, Amish businessmen, put on for every year for these 500 Amish widows. So we've had that experience as well as the travel, and this is the next best thing that I can do if you haven't gone or if you don't plan to go. Some people have mobility and others have money issues, and so this is the next best thing. I do have a book, and I guess I left it in my backpack back there, 40 chapters I've written on the sites of Israel. I can't take you to all 40 of those sites in the next 8 weeks. But if you're here for all 8 weeks, I'll be happy to give you one of those books. All right? Okay, if you're here for 7, I'll give it to you. Oh, thank you. Right here it is. It's called The Holy Land, a 40-day devotional. And I wrote this book for those who have gone to Israel and want to remember what they heard there. There's 3 pictures for each site. There is the material that we share there, the spiritual application, and then a prayer that Larry Smith wrote for every chapter. Most of them, anyway. So I'll be happy to share this with you at the end of the class, the end of February, if you'd like. And some of the things that I'll say are there. There's a whole lot more, though, obviously, than what I can cover. So this is kind of the way we'll navigate. Today will be an introduction, and I want to talk to you about some of those things on the first line there. Next week, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Sepphoris, Mount Arbel, and Capernaum, Bethsaida, up around the Sea of Galilee. Then we'll go down to the Dead Sea to Qumran, Masada, the Judean wilderness, the Jordan River. Then we'll come up from the Dead Sea region, which is the lowest spot on earth, by the way. The Dead Sea is 1,400 feet below sea level. There is no other place that is lower than that. And so when you come up to Jerusalem from the Dead Sea, you're only going 15, 20 miles, and yet you're climbing about 4,000 feet. Jerusalem's in that center spine, the mountain that runs through the center of the country. And then we'll do the Old City. We'll go down to the Valley of Elah, where David fought Goliath, Beersheba, Joppa, and Caesarea. And then we're going to share some archaeological discoveries that confirm the historicity of the New Testament. Probably the last one, or maybe might flip that to number 7. But anyway, and then my son expects to come in. He has a coin collection, a biblical coin collection. He started a guy in Florida who is an expert in this, knows immediately when he puts his hand on a coin whether it's authentic or not. And so I think Joe has King Herod, and he's got maybe Alexander the Great. I mean, just coins from biblical times. And he's going to, I think I talked him to come in and sharing that with us. So anyway, back to my motto. You know, the company, whatever you call it, travel agency that we have, Martha and I, this is our theme. Even though we go to many other countries, people say, well, why should I go to the land of Israel? And I just say, well, I don't know. I guess when God came to earth, even he went to Israel. And that might be a good reason for you to go. So what I'm going to do here for the first couple minutes, I'm going to do it very fast. I'm just going to take you around the country real fast, all right, with some pictures, and then we'll get into the main lesson for today, all right? And I may do this because there's no way I can, you know, I've got 10,000 pictures from there. And there's no way I can expose you to everything, but maybe at the beginning of every session, I'll do 2-3 minutes of just like running you through a whole bunch of pictures, and then we'll get to the main topic for that lesson. So that's my cousin Stan Grable. Some of you know him. He's a pastor up in Salem, Ohio. And that's the Valley of Elah behind us, where David fought Goliath. Here, Tim and Becky were on a trip, and you remember sitting up on the Mount of Olives there, where we have our study, Capernaum, and the synagogue at Capernaum. Jesus was in that synagogue. Here's some GBS students. That's where we really started. I started taking family members to Israel in 2012. By 2014, the school, I was teaching at GBS at the time, they asked if I would start taking students there after a semester of study. And so this was one of them. It was an all-female trip on this one. There was a couple guys lined up to go on that trip, and they dropped out. And so it was me and 12 females. And so I called Scott Sobey in Ukraine, and I said, if I've ever needed you, pal, I need you now. And he came down on his first trip to Israel. Food is just wonderful there. My wife loves it because it doesn't have preservatives in it, or a lot of it doesn't, most of it doesn't, and so you eat very well. This is St. Peter's fish from the Sea of Galilee. They call it St. Peter's fish. Why? Well, because St. Peter fish there. There's 20-some species of fish in the Sea of Galilee. This is tilapia. Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the wilderness of Zin, the children of Israel wandered here. Harad Springs, where Gideon chose his 300. Mount Hermon, where Jesus was transfigured, highest mountain in Israel, Mount of Beatitudes. We know what was given there. A street scene in the old city of Jerusalem. Hezekiah's tunnel. Somebody told me just yesterday, I was on a trip, my favorite thing to do in Israel was going through Hezekiah's tunnel. It's 1/3 of a mile, and it gets pretty tight. Sometimes you have to bend down to go through. But the water's been flowing there from the Gihon Springs, and it created the pool that Jesus sent the man to dip in the pool and be healed. Camel ride. I think you know that guy. That was our first trip to Israel. I went with him and my son. Somebody gave us buddy passes on Delta back in 2012. A guy from the church I was pastoring at the time, and he said, you want to go anywhere in the world, Pastor? I can get you on, and even in first class for pennies on the dollar. I said, they go to Israel? He came back and said, yes. So Daryl and Tim and I headed for Israel 2012, first time ever, in a business class seat, $5,000 to $6,000 round trip. We paid $525. We felt like kings going, the three kings coming into the Holy Land. Judean wilderness, more scenes from it. Muslim ladies in Bethlehem, Jews praying at the Western Wall, Orthodox Jews. When I show this to my Amish friends, they can't. Well, anyway, they look very much like them. Casting for fish on the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea. You can sit out there and just float around and read whatever you want. Some people take their iPad. This guy's reading his newspaper. A donkey at Bethphage, that'd be where Jesus, or his donkey was picked up to take into the land, or come down the Mount of Olives into the city. The Garden Tomb, The Western Wall, you can see that's the most holy site for Jews. We'll talk about that later. Thousands of people packed in there on Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, one of the 3 feasts in the fall. This is interesting. The Jezreel Valley over here is Nazareth. Over here is Nazareth, and across the Jezreel Valley here is Megiddo, and that's where the word Armageddon comes from. The Valley of Armageddon is here. When Jesus would come out and stand on the brow of Nazareth and look across, he could see Megiddo. And so this represents his first coming, and in some ways this represents a second coming of Christ, just across the valley. I like that picture. Just reminds me of Jesus standing there with his disciples. And by the way, the boat that he was in, they're very small boats. They were very small. And it was a good reason why they were afraid they were going to be swamped that day when they were out with the disciples. We're on a bigger boat. That's the Nazareth brow I was talking about. Megiddo is over there. Again, that's the Jezreel Valley. Out in the middle is a town called Afula. It's where Gideon came from. Sheep and a shepherd in Bethlehem. Sunrise over the Dead Sea. So, we started going. Oh, by the way, here's another couple faces you recognize. What year were you there with us? 23, okay. Yeah, it was maybe the next group. Was it the next group? We were there when the war broke out. But we didn't even know the war was going on. A policeman stopped us going into Nazareth and said, "You know that Israel's at war?" We said, "No." He said, "Well, maybe you want to go back to your hotel." After he left, I said, "Maybe we don't." And we finished that day doing what we did. We finished the trip. Nobody was afraid. All of that stuff was going on down around Gaza. So we've had the privilege of taking people from 33 states, 6 international countries, every walk of life, and anything from Lutherans to New Order Amish, and everything in between. Probably Baptists are our biggest, you might call them customers, clients that go, but every religious background. And it is so interesting. I'll get a call from Washington State, and somebody will say, "Hey, would you be willing to take our group?" And I say, "Okay, well, let me check schedule, see where we can put you." I said, "How'd you find out about us?" "Oh, well, through Answers in Genesis. We saw an advertisement there a few years ago." And so, and I did. We took a group for Ken Ham's supporters from around the country a few years ago, and Dr. Georgia Purdom went with us from there. So people couldn't join. That trip filled up really quick, so there were people that clipped that advertisement and kept us and called us years later from it. So they kind of blew our name from Massachusetts to California. And I'm like, how did you find out? Well, it's word of mouth mostly and those kind of things that have happened. And my wife, if they don't know my wife or haven't seen her before they arrived to Tel Aviv, a lot of people now know her. In fact, they'll call and say, "Is your wife going to be on the trip?" I said, "Not on this one, but her husband will be. Is that okay?" So, no, we want Martha there. Martha babies all the ladies, takes care of them, and people that are a little bit slow, whatever. And so they love her. They think they're going to like me at the beginning of the trip. At the end of it, they always love her, and I'm just kind of a footnote. Anyway, Martha actually talked me into doing this when I had her there, and so she has a really central part in what we're doing. She helps with logistics. She drives on the left side of the road when we're doing a tour in Ireland or England or Scotland. She's a driver in Israel if we need it. If we don't use a bus, we use cars with a smaller group. But when they come out of the airport at Tel Aviv, it's interesting. They'll look at me. Okay, I look normal, right? But she looks like a little Mennonite lady. And I can just see this Lutheran group or this Baptist group. They go, "Oh no, what cult did we just join?" But in 3 days, they love her, and everything's fine. And then they keep in contact with her for years after that. It's very interesting. So every denomination, we don't have any bias against taking any group that calls. Somebody asked me, "Do you take Catholics?" Well, we take a lot of former Catholics that have joined evangelical churches, but they come from every walk of life. So here quickly is some of the groups that we've taken. I'm just going to go through here quickly. Right here you can see a New Order Amish group. So there's Martha with Heidi Boardman. She was on that trip with you all, wasn't she? On that particular trip. So anyway, once again, I want to tell you, on my third trip to Israel, I took my wife for a month. We were all over the country, and we were on this mountaintop, which is called Susita, or Hippos, a Hebrew and Greek word. This is on the east side of the Sea of Galilee, and a lot of groups don't even get on the east side, but this mountaintop was built by the Greeks 300 years before Christ. It was the first city of the Decapolis, and it's where the demoniac came from. The demoniac, Jesus crossed the lake. He went from the Jewish side of the lake to the east side and sailed into a harbor not far from here. And when Jesus sent the demoniac, after he cured the demoniac, he said, go back to Decapolis. Well, this was the first city. Deca means 10, polis, city, so there were 10 cities, but this was the nearest one. And so most historians are quite certain that he came from here. Of course, he was running around that mountain and down below, living in the tombs. He was filled with thousands of demons, and Jesus crossed the lake that day and cured him and then told him, no, you can't go with me, go back to the city. Well, there are thousands of people living here, and it was a Greek city. That's why there were swine close by. On the Jewish side, there would have never been there, but on this side, and later on in this, one of the following lessons, I'll take you and I'll show you where that slope is that ran all the way down. There's only one place that those swine could run down and actually run into the Sea of Galilee, and it's not far from this place. But my wife and I were there. It wasn't even a site at that time. You could go there at your own risk. It's one of the national parks now. This is the front of it. When they excavated, this city lasted 1,000 years, till 700 plus AD, from 300 BC. That man must have been effective in his work because this city turned Christian. And under the Byzantines, they had 8 churches up there. They found the ruins of 8 Byzantine churches. Amazing. An earthquake leveled the city, buried it, snapped pillars like that in half. It was buried for 1,300 years until the Jews came home in 1948 and started uncovering the land. And they uncovered this huge city that was there, the first city of the Decapolis. You can even see the ruts on the main road there that were brought about by the carts. And so we were sitting right here on the front of that mountain overlooking the whole Sea of Galilee. We owned the mountain that day. There was nobody on there but Martha and I. This was 2013. And we were sitting under that olive tree right there. And my wife turned to me and said, Dan, you've got to start bringing people to Israel. And I'm like, what? I remember laughing at her, kind of. Like, what are you talking about? She said, yeah, you have to do with people what you're doing with me. Taking you around, explaining stuff. And I said, oh, Martha, that sounds like a joke to me. Well, 12, 13 years later, she's laughing at me. Because within 9 months after that, we had our first group there. I came back, and Mike Avery's son, Josh, said, hey, why don't you start taking groups there? And it went to the academic committee, and it was approved, and bingo. We never looked back. And within a couple years, churches and organizations and others began to ask us about whether we would take them there on trips, and so we're continuing to do that. Now, we're going back in. We haven't been there because of the war, not because it was unsafe to be there. It really wasn't. But people's perception. So I have to deal with their safety perception, their idea of whether it's safe or not. So you get a husband that wants to go and his wife's afraid to go, or you get half of a church, and the other half of the group doesn't want to go. So just put it off, and we've been doing Switzerland and all the other countries the last couple years. But we plan to go back in with 3 groups, and we have some openings on the first and third one this year. But anyway, that's where Tribe of Dan Tours was born. I had, I think, a college group there in the early years, and one of the students said, hey, we're the Tribe of Dan, as they were following me around. My name's Dan, and if you know anything about the Glick name, it's a Jewish name. Our heritage, we came from Switzerland. 7th generation great-grandfather was a Jew, he and his wife both. They were persecuted under the Reformed church and government of Switzerland. And so they converted to Christianity, but to the Anabaptist version of it, because they were the only ones not persecuting them. In fact, both the Anabaptists and the Jews were being persecuted in Switzerland. So my seventh-generation great-grandfather moved to colonial Pennsylvania in 1748. They were massacred by Indians in 1756, all but one little boy that was sent away the day before. His name was Johnny Glick, and any Glick you know that has Anabaptist background bottlenecked through this boy. But Glick is a Yiddish name and a Jewish name. And so while we're sitting there, and then when we got a group coming, that's where we came up with the name Tribe of Dan. It was actually a student or somebody that said it, and it stuck. If you know anything about the tribe of Dan, though, in Scripture, they were the bad tribe. You know that, right? They were terrible, these people. Just read the book of Judges, and you know they relocated to the north, and they were the first tribe then to be carried away by the Assyrians. But I tell you, for the last 12 years, we've been redeeming the tribe of Dan. 7 time zones away is Israel. By the way, the Christian church didn't get founded in New York or Washington or London or Paris. It's Middle Eastern. It came out of, as we know, day of Pentecost. Church was born in Jerusalem. Some people think Christianity is a white, Western, European/American religion in its origins. Of course, nothing can be farther from the truth. There's little Israel there surrounded by all these countries. Why they don't think that the Jews could have a little slice of this earth for all 15 million of them, and there's only about 7.5 million actually in the land. The other 7.5 live in America, and then a few 100,000 scattered around. But that's the land right there. Gaza Strip, West Bank, Golan Heights is now part of this area here. Donald Trump was the first president to acknowledge that Golan Heights was Israeli, belonged to the Israelis. Another map there, the West Bank. We'll talk more about some of this later. It's the size of New Jersey, Israel is. So it's a very small, 290 miles from Mount Hermon all the way to the Red Sea, the southern tip. 85 miles wide at its widest point. So we're talking about a little strip of land. But yet, the whole world's focused on it. It's in the news. As you know, the Jews are behind everything. I read this morning that the Jews orchestrated the Venezuela dictator's kidnapping, or whatever they call it now, where they took him. The Jews are behind that. I've talked to people, they see the Jews behind everything. In fact, Candace Owens recently said that they orchestrated 19th century slavery, slave trade. That's where she lost thousands of people. Okay, just say crazy things like that, and eventually even people that are gullible wake up. But it's so bizarre, that kind of thing. Well, anyway, here's just a couple population statistics. This is, again, an introductory lesson, so I just want to kind of set the stage. 15.8 million. As we know, the Holocaust, there were about 14 million Jews, and when Hitler was done, there were about 12 million. When Hitler was done with his work, there were 6 million. He cut world Jewry in half. Now it's up to that again and a little bit past that. Palestinians that live in the West Bank, 5.4. 2 million alone in Gaza. The population of Israel proper is 10.1. 75% of those are Jews. That's why you have about 7.5 million Jews. Well, who are the rest? Well, they're Arabs. When they tell you that Israel's an apartheid state, it's not true. 20% of their population is Arab, and they're citizens of Israel. They take part in the Knesset, the parliament. You've got Arabs on the Supreme Court. You have them at every level, just like African Americans in this country. At every level of our society, so are Arabs in Israel. Don't believe a word when they tell you it's apartheid. In fact, it works a little bit the other way, because there are places in the West Bank that Jews are not allowed to go to. They're not allowed to go to Jericho. I've driven into Jericho many times. There's a big red sign, no Jews are allowed here. Why? Because the government can't protect them there. They still go in, but there's no protection for them if they go in. The government's not going to come for a Jew if they go, for an Israeli if they go past this. Now, I don't say Israeli. I should say Jew, because an Arab can go there all day long. I've had Israeli Arabs tell me, hey, we have more freedom than Jews because we can go to the West Bank, we can go to Jordan, we can go anywhere in Israel. So again, believe what you will, but you got to search for the truth in so many things that are being said today and have been. There's the Knesset. They have a parliamentary system, and 120 members of the Knesset. This guy never goes away. As you know, he just keeps coming back, and he's the guy that seems to be able to build a coalition over and over and over again. He's still there, as you know. So the temple at the time of Christ looked something like this. And as we know, the Romans came in AD 70. 40 years after Christ, the Romans came, circled the city, destroyed the second temple that had been built way up by Herod the Great. And he had flattened out that 35-acre Temple Mount that was a part of the southeast corner of the old city. So here's the Temple Mount. Today's old city is a bit different than this, but this was during the time of Christ, what it looked like. Kidron Valley, the Hinnom Valley, that's the valley of hell. The meaning is a Gehenna or hell as we translate it. So Jesus issued a warning to his disciples 40 years before the Romans came. He said, listen, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you know that its desolation is near. Let those that are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those in the city get out. And let those in the country not enter the city, because the time of punishment is about to come. Do you know when the Romans got there and came in, it was a bloodbath. The Jews were exiled all over the world. Many of them were crucified right there on the Mount of Olives. It was a horrible thing. The temple was destroyed. These Jews... the Jews that had converted to Christianity, they took seriously this warning. So when they knew the Romans were coming, they knew the city was marked for destruction. And you know where they went? They fled to the mountains of what we call Jordan today, over on the other side of the Jordan. I've read already that not one Christian perished in the destruction of AD 70 because of this warning from Christ. Now look, it says Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles. You know, they'll be exiled, the Jews, they'll fall by the sword, they'll be taken prisoners to all nations, and they've been scattered all over the world until the nation was reborn in 1948. They didn't even have independence at this point. You have to go back 2,500 years to get to the time when Israel was an independent, functioning country on their own with no foreign power in charge. 2,500 years. And it says that Jerusalem would be trampled on by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. 1948, Israel becomes a nation. 19 years later, Israel does battle with Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. They defeat them in 6 days, and they take the old city, because it was still under Jordan. They also take the West Bank, even though they leave the Palestinians in charge there, and Jordan to some degree. But that's when the old city came under Jewish control again. Think about it. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That's a little wake-up call, isn't it? It's now not under Gentile control. Interesting. The Jews are the authority up there, even though they've left the Muslims call the shots when it comes to the rules. If you go up there, you got to be covered from basically head to foot, or neck to foot. And there's some other rules. You can't take a Bible up there, and you can't pray up there, and But the old city now is under Israeli control. So has the time of the Gentiles. Is it coming to an end? He said, when the Romans come, they're going to throw all the stones off the Temple Mount. When the city was destroyed, the temple was thrown down. 1948, the Jews come and they start digging all around the Temple Mount. Guess what they uncovered? They uncovered the stones that were thrown down 2,000 years ago, just like Jesus said. They're laying there for you to observe today. This is what replaced the temple. Again, this is the Temple Mount. It's 35 acres. Right in the middle of it, 400 or 500 years after Christ, the Muslims conquered the land, and they came in and built this Dome of the Rock. Now, it wasn't gold-covered, plated like that. That was a gift from King Hussein of Jordan a few years back. He sold one of his houses in London and gave 1.3 carat millimeter gold to cover it. And so it's one of the most photographed buildings in the world. But that's what replaced it. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is there as well. That's a place of tension. This is where God put his name. This is where the first 2 temples were built. And when you go up there, there's tension there. You can feel it. You can cut it with a knife. The Muslims don't want any Jews coming up there, and the Jews want to come, and then they want to pray. And so there's Israeli soldiers up there, and usually the Muslims are fine with my tour groups. One time they tried to block our way, and I asked an Israeli soldier behind me, I said, "Can we go through there?" He said, "Yeah, you can." I said, "Yeah, but what about?" He said, "We're here." Of course, they had their guns, you know, and things worked out fine that day. Quick 20th century history. So, the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, were in charge of what we call Israel today for 400 years, from the 16th century to the 20th century. But in World War I, the British drove the Ottomans out. And then they were given what's called the British Mandate. So they were in charge there from 17 to 47. In 1948, Israel gained statehood. The UN affirms that. Even Russia voted for statehood for Israel. But they only controlled part of the land. They didn't the West Bank. They didn't even East Jerusalem or the old city there that has walls around it. They gained that in 1967 in the Six-Day War. So here's the Palestine Post, 1948, May 14th. Israel is reborn. No country's ever been reborn after it fell. No country ever has been. Why was Israel? Because God said it would be. That's why. Ezekiel 34:13, I'll bring them out of the nations, gather them from the countries, and I'll bring them into their land. That's been going on for the last almost 60, 70 years. They've been coming from all over. Every year, more Jews go home, especially now that there's such anti-Semitic ideas in Europe and even here in the U.S. now. So they're going home. Why? Because they feel secure there. They've got land there. The government will protect them. He said, I'll pasture them on the mountains and the ravines and in all the settlements of the land. And there are settlements all over since 1948. Look at this. I'm going to come down here to Amos 9. I will bring my people Israel back from exile. Now, you could say, well, that was the exile under the Assyrians and under the Babylonians. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, he did bring them back there, but they were uprooted again. Look what this says. I'll plant Israel in their own land, never again to be uprooted from the land that I give them. You know, the debates going on right now is that the current Jews in the land have no significance. You've heard of replacement theology, right? The church replaces the Jews. They have no more significance than any other place. I get asked that question. I got asked that question at Panera Bread this week, where I work by the fireplace all the time. And I said, it's not either or, it's both and. The church is made up of Jews and Gentiles. It's the body of Christ. But then to decide that Israel has no biblical significance anymore is a mistake. What about this Israel that will be planted in the land and never uprooted? If that's not the current one, can you tell me which one? Because they've all been uprooted prior. And then what about Romans 11? And we can go on and on how they're going to be grafted back in and all of Israel be saved. You know that statement from Romans 11. So again, I'm not going to be pushed into either corner. It's not either or, it's both and. The church is the body of Christ, made up of Jew and Gentile, but Israel has some end-time significance. All you have to do is follow their wars, and you cannot believe the miracles that happen around the things. I mean, they took on, 7 entities in the last couple years and defeated every one of them. They're a little group of people. 7. The Arabs don't even have to serve in the military in Israel. They can be citizens, but they don't have to serve because they know that Israel's government knows that they might have to fight other fellow Arabs in a war. So they exempt them from the military. So you got 7 million people there, and only part of them are actually in the military. And yet, what do? They just beat up on anybody that attacks them. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Do we give them help? Yeah, we do. Anyway. The news, is so interesting. I was with an Iranian man, a friend of mine up the road from where we live. He's so excited about what's happening in Iran. He said, Iran and Israel are going to be like this. And the guy that wants to come back, the Shah of Iran's son, he's already been in Israel, and they've said, hey, we can help you with your water problem, and we can this. And he wants to join the Abrahamic Accords if he becomes the new leader of Iran. And finally, this ancient civilization in Israel will be back, maybe working together before long, if what's happening right now is successful in Iran. Well, anyway, 1948, David Ben-Gurion was the prime minister of Israel. And he was excited, of course. He made the announcement that the UN's just, given us the right to exist, and we're a country now. But he was also sad because he knew they would be attacked right away by Arab countries. And they were by 7 Arab countries the next day. And for 9 months, the ragtag team of Israel beat off 7 nations until March of the following year. That alone, Martha and I love the series called Against All Odds. Produced by a CNN former Jewish agnostic turned to be a believer in God when he documented the miracles that have happened in Israel since 1948 to the present. Look it up and watch it. It's an amazing series. This was one of them. Again, 6-day war. How does a country like that take on 3 countries and beat them in 6 days? But they did. This is how much land they grabbed. The Golan Heights, all of the West Bank, and all of the Sinai from Egypt. But Egypt signed a peace deal with them, and they gave the Sinai back to them. The West Bank, Jordan went home and left the West Bank under Israeli control for the most part, and the Syrians would never come to the table and make some kind of agreement with them, so they've kept the Golan Heights since that time. And Trump, in his first term, said, yeah, that's their land now. So the battle lines were here. 6 years later, those 3 countries, on Israel's most holy day, Yom Kippur, everything shuts down. Cars don't drive, people stay in. It's the Day of Atonement. It's in September, October, every year. And they were attacked. The Arab world was smarting from their loss of the 6-day war in 1967. So 6 years later, they attack Israel on Yom Kippur. And it looks like the state of Israel would fall. Golda Meir was the prime minister. She called Richard Nixon. She was contemplating suicide or fleeing with her cabinet. She called Richard Nixon in the middle of the night and pled for help from Nixon. She said, we don't need men, we need arms and ammunition. Will you please help us? Interestingly, Nixon had made some anti-Semitic statements, but it was against liberal Jews in America who were Democrats and not Republicans. And yet he undertook the largest airlift in our history to that point. This is what he sent them. When Golda Meir heard about this, she began to weep. Richard Nixon's mother had told Dick, as he was known, as a young man, if you ever get a chance to help the Israelis, the Jews, do it. She had no idea he would be the president at one of the most critical times in this young nation's existence. He did what his mother told him to do. Now, did I have you all at the Valley of Tears? Okay, so that's Syria over there. It's Israel on this side of the Golan Heights. In the 73 war, 1,800 Soviet-style tanks came across that field and tried to break through the Israeli line, the tanks. There were only 180 Israeli tanks there, and there were 1,400 coming at them. If they broke through there, nothing would stop them from rolling across the Jordan, and rolling right into Tel Aviv and taking the country. But 180 tanks held off 1,400 that day and that night. And some of the tanks are still there. You probably climbed on them, didn't you, when you were there? Amazing. But a number of Israeli soldiers died there fighting, and there are trees planted in their honor at the place where we go. It's a land of miracles. By the way, what time is it? I completely lose myself when I'm talking about this. I could go to 2 or 3 o'clock if you're up for that. Okay. The incident in the Golan Heights, 1973. I can't tell you. You're going to have to get You're going to have to get that series I told you to read about some of the incredible miracles that happened right in the Golan Heights in the War of 73. I had an incident happen on my very first trip that I'll tell you about when we get to the Valley of Elah that I have no explanation for. In fact, we've had 3 things happen when we were with our group in the Valley of Elah. I told a Jewish woman that, not even a believer in Jesus, just a believer in God. She said, miracles are happening here all the time. And I'll tell you about those miracles in subsequent. So here's the spine of the country. That's the mountains in the middle, run north and south. Then you have the Jordan Valley, and then you have the coastal plains over here by the Mediterranean. I don't have a lot of time. Some famous biblical mountains are Gilboa, Carmel, Arbel, Hermon, Jezreel, Hula, Kidron, Hinnon, Jordan, Elah valleys, Judean, Negev, the Arava, Zin. The plain would start up in the north, Akko, Sharon, and the Philistine plain, the southwest area. That's the coast. So here's what I recommend when you go on my trip. It's my favorite souvenir from Israel. It's a raised relief map that actually showed. Did you guys happen to get one of these, It's so nice because it shows the elevation. Again, in the Jordan Rift Valley, it's the lowest spot on earth. And then, of course, if there was a channel between the Mediterranean and the Jordan Rift Valley, the whole valley would fill up with water because you're 1,400 feet below sea level. Sea of Galilee even is 600 feet below sea level. Anyway, you're free to take a look at that and then go on my trip and get one there. What's happening here? Oh, there we are. All right. Wow. This thing went dead. I think the battery died. What's that? All right. Yeah, good enough. So just to kind of give you an idea where the Jews came from and really where the Old Testament starts. I mean, we know it starts with creation. We don't know when things began, and we don't know when they're going to end, right? When people say, when the world started, I don't know. Do you know? Genesis 1:1 doesn't date itself. And neither do we know when it's all going to end. But we do know that in 2000 BC, Abraham was here. He's the first Hebrew Jew, and he's in the Ur of the Chaldees, and the Lord tells him to come and promises his ancestors that this land would be theirs. And then 4 BC, somewhere between 6 BC and 2 BC or 1 BC, Jesus was born. So Jesus was here before Christ. The calendar's messed up a little. And then halfway between, you had King David on the throne from 1010 to 970. So no wonder Malachi starts his book by saying, Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. He's making 1,000-year jumps, and he fills it in with the generations in between, the genealogy. But this is where it all started. And what's interesting is you only have 11 chapters to cover at least the first 2,000 years. Creation, the fall, the flood, the Tower of Babel, and then Abraham gets called. Genesis chapter 12, and what do you have here? You have 1,600 years given to the rest of the Old Testament. And Malachi's written in about 430 BC. Abraham's born in 2166. 1,700 years. So we know something really significant started with Abraham. God's reclamation project started with Abraham. Jesus Christ would be the seed of Abraham. Do you know that you would know very little about God unless a Jew told you? All you would have is Romans chapter 1, what you observe from nature. The Old Testament was written by Jews. New Testament written by who? Jews. I was talking to some Jewish girls one time from high school. My son was with me, and he wasn't married. And they're like, oh, Joseph. And he has a Hebrew name, Joseph, you know. And they were very interested in me because of him. Parents can figure that out real quick. And they said, oh, but you're probably Christians, right? They wanted Joe to be a Jew. I said, yeah, we're Christians, thanks to you. And they said, what? What do you mean? I said, you ever read the Tanakh? That's the word for the Old Testament. Yeah. I said, you ever read the New Testament? Oh, no, we're not allowed to read that. I said, who do you think wrote the New Testament? It was Jews. And then I said, and then Jesus was a what? Oh, yeah, they said. He was a Jew, one girl said. Yep, sorry about that. I said, if you're upset with us for being Christians, go home and look in the mirror because you're the reason. That's the end of the argument with the Jews. And I have those every so often. Muslims, it's a completely different approach. But with them, it's easy if they're upset that you're a Christian. God said to Abraham, look, I want you to leave your land. The bottom line is that he said, I'm going to bless you, make your name great, make you a great nation. But here's the other part of the covenant. You will be a blessing. Okay? I'm going to bless you, but you're going to be a blessing. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. You're sitting here today. Are you part of a family? You're blessed for one reason. Because of Abraham and the promise God gave to Abraham. Of course, we know that we got the scriptures. Here's the top line of the covenant, I'll bless you. Bottom line, you'll be a blessing. Abraham comes from over here. Today is Iraq. Comes into the land. People say, well, does God care about the Jews more than anyone else? I remember reading the Old Testament and saying God had this special people that he loved and the rest of the world he didn't really care for. Nothing could be farther from the truth. He said, I'm calling you, Abraham. I'm going to bless one man to reach all men. I'm going to choose one nation to reach all nations. And they're the ones that should be bringing the light, Isaiah said, to the rest of the world. Paul even argued that on one of his missionary trips. He quotes Isaiah and said that, you know, the light to the Gentiles comes from the Jewish people. Why? Because they gave us the scriptures and they gave us the Savior. And this is why Abraham and the Jews are significant. Jesus said that salvation is of the Jews. Now, I want to finish with this, if I'm allowed a couple minutes yet. The Sea of Galilee, about 8 miles by about 13 miles long or so. Jesus did most of his ministry right around the northern half of this. He lived in Capernaum after he moved from Nazareth. 8 by 13, lowest freshwater lake on the earth, 600 feet below sea level on its surface, 150 feet deep at its deepest, about 90 feet at the average depth. That's why you can get waves real quick with wind. It's so shallow. Easily disturbed. It's teeming with fish. Why? Because right up here, the Jordan comes into the Sea of Galilee, and right down here, it runs out. So you have blessing in and blessing out. You have water coming in, you have water going out. That keeps the lake alive. Couple pictures. 75 miles south, you come to the Dead Sea. Why is the Dead Sea dead? Because you have water in and no water out. It's the lowest spot on earth. There's nothing that it can't flow out. So it turns to salt. It's 8 to 10 times saltier than the ocean. That's why you can't sink in it either. You walk in chest high, you just come right off. My wife, first time I had her there, said, Dad, I can't swim. Please hang on to me. I said, Martha, you can't drown. She said, I don't believe it. Like, please hang on to me. So I pushed her out a little bit and hung on to her for a little, and then I just pushed her away. And then I couldn't get her out of the water. It was the first time she could swim. She loved it. So there it is, 10 miles wide, 48 miles long, inlet, but no outlet. Lowest spot on earth, 1,400 feet below sea level, 8 times saltier than the ocean, cannot sink. Those guys from GBS are just out there standing in the water, but not on the bottom. You can't go lower than that. You just come off. There's Micah Litchfield. She's married now, but she was just floating around out there. Now, my question I'm closing with. Are you more like the Sea of Galilee or the Dead Sea? And your pastor actually asked you the same question earlier today. Are you serving other people? You have other people's concerns in front of you, or is it just self-interest? You remember him talking that? Well, are you more like the Sea of Galilee, blessings in and blessings out? or more like the Dead Sea. Remember the Abrahamic covenant? I'll bless you, but you'll be a blessing. The moment you quit being a blessing, you turn into the Dead Sea. You're just a reservoir of self-interest, and everything dies. You can get in the Dead Sea and float clear to Jordan, and no fish will ever nibble at your feet. But when I'm baptizing people in the Jordan River just south of the Dead Sea, fish are nibbling on my feet almost all the time while I'm baptizing people. They're down there, they like my feet for some reason. But nothing like that ever happens in the Dead Sea. There's no life there. And friend, if we become a reservoir of self-interest, God will get rid of us just as quick as he does anybody. The church, Old Testament, Jews, by the time of Christ, it was all about us. Forget the Samaritans, forget this, forget that, but the church acts the same way, or can. And what happens? The spigot gets turned off. God's not going to keep blessing people who don't pass it on to others. And you can't keep spiritually alive. You can't keep alive at all. You're just a dead personality, interested in yourself, that's all. Even the land illustrates the gospel in Israel. Many spiritual lessons can come from the land and do, and this is one of them. So, again, we've all been blessed. We all have an inlet of blessing in our life. But are we all a blessing? Do we have an outlet in which we convey God's blessings to others? A channel or a conduit of blessing, or a reservoir of self-interest? Are you the Sea of Galilee, or are you the Dead Sea? It's the question I want to leave you with. Let's pray. Lord, take this message, this covenant that you gave to Abraham, and now your word teaches that we're children of Abraham through faith in Christ, so we're inheritors of the same covenant and blessing. Lord, if we know our hearts, we want to be blessed by you, but we want to be a blessing. And I pray that everyone sitting here today might again be renewed in their commitment to be a conduit of blessing to others. Even today, before the day's over, with our words, with our actions, we might be a conduit of blessings to others instead of a reservoir of self-interest. Make us the Sea of Galilee, teeming with life, not the Dead Sea, Lord. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. All right. You're free to go.